do you have any advice for clients when you meet them, if they, or maybe clients or just colleagues or people in general who are thinking about moving abroad, if they don't have that strong gut feeling that you had,
Mm.
what would you say to them? What would be your advice from your
I
experience?
mean, everything starts with a thought or like a dream. A lot of people have dreams about, moving abroad or buying something abroad, and talk to people. I mean, do your research. There are a lot of people that have done this before. Either if you're gonna, just spend some time abroad or moving permanently. There are a lot of people, especially nowadays. I mean, it was a different story 8 to 10 years ago. It was not that common that people would leave Sweden to live abroad. But today it is more common. I mean, we have a lot of Swedes living here permanently, and Swedish schools and Swedish companies. So it is like a small Swedish community here. And not only for Swedes, I mean, a lot of nationalities. Here in Costa del Sol, we have more than 150 different nationalities living
Mm.
and investing in the real estate. So it's quite dynamic, and different cultures and different nationalities. So my first advice would be to speak to people who have done it, or already located in that area that you're interested in. I think that is the most natural way of doing it as well, like researching, talking to people. Within the real estate sector, we speak to a lot of people who have dreams about buying something or moving. And so yeah, I would say that it's my first and best recommendation, to speak to people and do your research.
Okay, so you touched a little bit on there about, well, in some ways we can come to the. I want to ask you about the Costa del Sol specifically and about the real estate specifically
Mm,
in a little bit later on. I want to talk a bit more about you and your personal experience first. But one of the things that makes, I mean, I mentioned to you last time we spoke that I spent January last year in just down the road in Estepona.
yeah,
So I spent the month there. I got a feel for what it's like there. I understand what you mean. It's a very it's like a melting pot. It's a mixture of, you know, there's like lots of different communities having a Spanish life.
yeah,
If that makes sense, that's how I
yeah,
would describe
yeah.
it. You know,
I think that was a very
yeah,
good description.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
That's how it felt to me. And so, but that's a little bit that's well, that's quite different again from my experience because I moved to like a small Italian town where no one spoke English, and we were like the English community. Me and my colleagues, we were the English speaking community, and we were very international in ourselves because we
Yeah.
weren't all British. But so that's a different kind of experience again. So I'm thinking here about the moving to a place with the language, and I think that holds a lot of people back. They're concerned about integrating into
Mm,
a place. They're concerned about getting around and doing things. But I know in
mm.
your case, that's perhaps you have a different problem from most people because you do speak many different languages, and that's you weren't starting from that same place of only speaking one language, for example. So
Yeah.
how did you find that, like integrating into Spain and getting into that life when you first moved there?
I mean, my goal was to integrate myself in the Spanish culture and system, learning the language, feeling like a Spanish native, or local. That was my goal. But I started in a company, a Swedish company, located in the city, Fuengirola. And why I chose Fuengirola is because when I was doing my research, because one important thing is I've never been to Costa del Sol before deciding to move down here. So I
Mm.
didn't know anything about the area. So I was mainly doing my research via Google and Facebook groups. And then I found out that here in this city, we have a Swedish school, we have Swedish shops, we have Swedish companies, and that felt safe for me to take this, leap of faith and just book one ticket and sell everything and go. So I started in a Swedish company, and naturally you speak Swedish because all of your colleagues are Swedes and you speak to Swedish clients back home in Sweden. So my vision of, learning the Spanish language, I really fast, understood that it will take time. I'm an immigrant here in Spain, and I need to get to know some locals to learn the language. Um, I did get to know two of my Swedish colleagues actually. One was from Chile, and one was born and raised here in Spain. So both, were Spanish native speaking, and one of these friends had a kid as well. She was about 3 years, 4 years old back then, and I love kids and I love being social. So for me, it was super natural to connect with her, and she only spoke Spanish. So my first year in Spain, I was learning Spanish mainly from a 3, 4 year old girl because that was my level of language, of communication. And of course, I learned some from my friends as well, but we were mainly speaking Swedish because that was more natural for us to keep the conversations, flowing. But I quickly understood that learning a new language and integrating to a new country is not that easy when you have your Swedish community. And this is something that we often discuss here amongst the Swedish community, that it is not easy. You need to make the difference yourself. If you don't put yourself out there, then it's hard to learn the language. But today, 8 years later, I understand when Spanish speak to me. Sometimes I need to ask them to slow down because they speak very fast. I still speak like an immigrant. I mean, you can hear I'm an immigrant speaking Spanish, but I manage. I can do whatever I have need to do, going to the town hall or wherever appointments and errands I have, I can manage. But of course it takes some mental energy to sometimes think about the grammar, or sometimes I do not find a word. But yeah, I had a clear vision about that, a goal, but I realized it's not that easy immigrating to a new country.
So it's a really interesting. That's a really interesting observation because again, I've had that exact same experience where you're. Well, I mean, I think learning, having the opportunity to learn from a child is probably really helped because
Yeah.
I didn't have that, but I did have my community of English speaking colleagues, and I had to work in English. So I found very quickly you get to a level, and that level for me was how to order pizza, how to order coffee,
Yeah.
and then it's really hard to go beyond that level.
Yeah.